Was it worth the price?
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and these are all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things you might have missed in House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 5. Now, we opened the episode with a shot of the backside of High Tide. Now remember, last season when we saw High Tide at a better point of view for the Valerians, we opened with a grand shot of the castle that was brightly lit. But now, we only see it in shadow. The sun is setting on High Tide, showing that Rhaenys's death is ushering in a darker era for the Valerians. Corlys hobbles to the Driftwood throne. Now this mirrors when Rhaenys found out that Corlys may have died at sea. Earlier this season, she was worried about him returning to his ships and dying at war because of her experiences in Season 1. Now, he finally understands why. And then we cut to Rhaenyra. It looks like she's staring at the sky, but remember,
Dragonstone and their dragons are just across the bay.
she's actually staring across to Rook's Rest. It's also where we've seen the unclaimed dragons play in earlier episodes, so she might still be expecting, against all odds, that she'll see Meleys in the sky. And also her looking toward these unclaimed dragons is foreshadowing the ending, but we'll talk about that a little later. Also, if you look closely, her necklace looks like a dragon's teeth with drops of blood, a subtle nod to how Meleys tragically met her end. Then we cut to King's Landing, where the multi-week shipping blockade has taken its toll on their food.
But person, isn't the Reach the biggest source of food in Westeros? And isn't the Reach Team Green?
You really know your lore, Doug. Good job. High five. The Reach is the biggest source of food within Westeros, but that's the thing. King's Landing didn't get all of its food from Westeros. You see, King's Landing is right on the water, so they imported a lot of food from Essos by ship. Since House Valerion has the most ships, Corlys blocked all trade into King's Landing, causing a food and supply shortage. Man, speaking of food, I am hungry.
Hey, what's for lunch?
Oh, well, I'm just gonna eat this cup of garlic dipping sauce like it's a pudding cup.
Ah, geez, person, do we really have to have you go through this mummer's farce? You gotta start eating better, man.
I know, but I hate cooking, and like we're so busy these days that I just always grab what's in front of me, like this cup of hot buffalo sauce that I am gonna eat right now. Oh God, it's so spicy, I wish I hadn't done that. Next time, I'll eat this delicious, nutritious meal from Factor, the sponsor of this video. Guys, this is a creamy pesto pork chop with spinach, cauliflower, rice, and roasted green beans.
Wow, did you make that food?
I did not make this food. You see, Factor meals are chef-crafted and dietitian approved. They are served always fresh, never frozen, and they're ready in just 2 minutes. Plus, it's only around 550 calories per serving, and it's so delicious. Choo, choo, choo. Guys, I love Factor meals. This is one of my favorite sponsors we have on the channel. So I've been using them for a little over a year now, and it has improved my daily life so much. I'm eating better, and I have noticed such a big difference physically. I mean, there are so many days when I just forget to eat, and I end up just eating gross junk food or, spoon feeding myself sauce cups. But now, Factor meals help me to get through my day with no hassle. 2 minutes, no prep, no mess. I mean, I'll be honest with you guys, I am terrible at cooking, and I usually just eat like crap, especially on busy days like today when we're dropping Easter egg videos. I can't find the time to make healthy food. And right now, it's summer outside, and I don't want to worry about eating healthy or heating up my kitchen when it's so hot outside, so Factor is perfect for me. Factor offers 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, so you're always able to try something new that I never would have had before. It's also way cheaper than the overpriced takeout food that I used to eat when I just didn't have the time to cook at night. So I highly recommend you head to factor75.com or click the link below and use the code ScreenCrush50 to get 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off your next box. That's code ScreenCrush50 at factor75.com to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month of orders. Now, back to the Easter eggs. Then we see Meleys.
The traitor dragon Meleys!
And I will say, it's kind of insane that they call the dragon a traitor. Clearly, the dragons have minds and wills of their own, but I'm not sure they understand monarchies or lines of succession.
Well, yeah, but Drogon melted the Iron Throne after Jon killed Daenerys.
Yes, and that sentence reflects the writing quality of Season 8. Now, I should also mention that Meleys and Vhagar were once written by husband and wife. Their previous writers were Balon and Alyssa Targaryen, the parents of Daemon and Viserys Targaryen. Now, when the head of the procession says,
Slain at Rook's Rest by your king!
they pan to Cole, who looks guilty because, of course, he knows the truth about what happened. Last week we talked about how Cole has to feel like he's the good guy in all this. He's very self-righteous, so even he doesn't feel good about lying to the public. And this lie is also the version remembered by history. In the book, it says that Aegon and Sunfire fought until the bitter end and never mentioned that Aemond was really the one who killed Rhaenys and Meleys. And I love the details here that they put into Meleys's head. You can even see tiny flies swarming around her skull because she's rotting. Behind her, we see banners of Stokeworth and Rosby, two Crownland houses that fell to Sir Crispin prior to episode 4. There are some new additions though, mainly House Duskendale, who lost their lord to Cole's blade, and of course House Staunton, whose seat was at Rook's Rest. Also notice that there's no 7-pointed star on Cole's new equine armor. After seeing the horrors of the Battle of Rook's Rest, Sir Crispin seems to be turning away from religion. We hear a kid say,
"I thought the dragons was gods."
And this actually reflects the myths around the Targaryens themselves.
Everyone says Targaryens are closer to gods than to men.
And we actually see those addressed later in the episode, so we're going to come back to that. It also shows how this war is actually disillusioning people against the Targaryens. Dragons were magical beings, but now that they can die, they're...
It's just me.
And then we see the rat catchers, who have been reduced to skeletons. Throughout this show, we have seen their bodies at various points of decomposition, and their bodies have also reflected Aegon's reign. When he first killed them, they were dead, but still in good condition, signaling that he was just starting to lose control. Later, we saw them rotting just as Cole leaves for his military campaign. Of course, it's ultimately the military campaign that leads to Aegon's injuries. And now, the bodies are completely gone, just as his reign is completely over. They carry Aegon into the castle, but in secret to highlight that there were no real victors in the battle. Also, notice that his crate actually covers the 7-pointed star as they rise. For this entire conflict, the Greens have turned to the God of the Seven to protect them.
May the Seven guide you. Good night, and lead you not into shadow and death.
For the Seven have blessed and shielded this host with divine purpose.
And this is a great visual metaphor to show that their conflict has eclipsed any protection the gods could give. When they pass by Helena, she is wearing black. Now, originally, I thought she was still mourning for Jaehaerys, but in episode 3, right after he was murdered, she still wears green. And this makes me think that she knew Aegon would get seriously injured in the battle. After all, it's not the first time she has predicted the future. They set him down in the same spot where Viserys' old model of Valyria once stood. The model highlighted a legacy yearning for the past, and Aegon's crate signifies that the future is going to be much, much darker. Also in the corner, we see the Silent Sisters. Now, the Silent Sisters are septas who specifically handle the last rites and dead bodies, which highlights just how perilous Aegon's condition truly is. We've seen Alicent in this dress before, but the last time she wore it, she also had a 7-pointed star belt on. This time, she's just wearing a simple rope belt, showing that she also seems to be turning away from her religion like we saw in the last episode. Now, Alicent must be having deja vu right here. For years, she watched King Viserys languish in bed, and now she's watching her son near death in the exact same bed. And don't forget, this is where Viserys whispered the prophecy to her.
The prince.
Prince Aegon.
To unite the realm.
And let's just say, it's very clear that Aegon is not the prince who was promised anymore. They're even having to pull away the burned skin and rot from him, just like they had to cut away the rot from Viserys' flesh for years. Notice how Alicent looks at Aemond when he walks in. She may not be a good mom, but she knows her boys. And earlier, she noticed the dagger, so she knows that Aemond had to have pulled it from Aegon's body. I love that they gave her this insight, despite that she is emotionally estranged from her children. We cut to Criston Cole meticulously cleaning his blade. Now, we've mentioned in previous episodes that his cleanliness directly ties to his honor. As he feels more dishonorable, either for breaking his vows or rushing people into an ill-advised campaign, outward signs of purity become more important.
The procession was muddy. I'll replace it, Hans.
Do it now.
His cloak and blade have to be spotless to compensate for the dirtiness of his actions. He's also in the Hans chambers, aka Otto's old chambers. Now, Alicent's relationship with her father was strained toward the end.
I have sinned.
I do not wish to hear of it.
But he definitely had her back more than Sir Criston Cole. The fact that she has to walk into her old lover's chambers shows how far she's fallen in status since the war started. He says,
Sunfire was long in the dying.
now, I'm going to go with superhero rules here. If we didn't see him die, he ain't dead. Also, guys, we made a mistake last week. We thought that Vhagar was a male, but actually, she is a badass grandma. She's like House of the Dragon, Helen Mirren. We're really sorry about the mistake. We can't exactly check under the hood of every flying nuke in this show. But don't worry, guys. From now on, we're going to put some respect on Grandma Vhagar's name. Now, back to Sir Criston Cole. Alicent asked if Aemond had any part in Aegon's injuries, and Cole says,
I could not say.
So this proves that he has completely ditched loyalty. He is now focused on just serving the person with the most power. Since Aegon's out of commission, the person with the most power now is Aemond.
Or isn't it his duty to protect the king?
Well, it is, but how much did that matter when Jaehaerys died? We cut to Dragonstone, where they topple Rhaenyra's pawn on Rook's Rest and replace it with the Hightower pawn, like it's a game of chess. And man, I just love when they do little game metaphors in this show. It just makes me feel like Peter Griffin.
He said it! He said it!
Rhaenyra is back in her regular necklace, a triangle to represent a dragon, and then the 3 red stones, most likely to represent the 3 original conquerors, Aegon, Visenya, and Rhaenys. But notice now there is a camera filter that creates spikier bits on the chain that looked like barbed wire. This is representing how a metaphorical noose is closing around her neck as the Greens have more and more victories. Then we get the sexism.
It is merely that the gentler sex, heretofore, has not been much privy to the strategies of battle.
Her council has always been a little sexist, but it's getting way more bold since Rhaenys died. Remember, Rhaenys was the only other adult woman to serve on Rhaenyra's council. All my love to Baela, she's a badass, but she still is a child. Without Rhaenys, Rhaenyra stands alone, a position that hasn't gone well for her Team Green counterpart. Now, Rhaenyra is quick to point out that
you've seen no more battles than I have,
which mirrors what Rhaenys said in the very first episode of the series.
These nights are as green as summer grass. None have known real war.
It also highlights that there is no legitimate reason a male ruler would be better than a female ruler except for sexism. Comparing Rhaenyra and Aegon, only one of them was actually prepared for the throne, and it's not on the basis of who's seen combat because hardly anyone in this realm has seen combat. Their fitness to rule is entirely based on who King Viserys prepared to rule. Rhaenyra says,
"Send to Maidenpool and to Cracklaw Point."
Maidenpool is one of the biggest settlements in the Crown Lands, and it's between Rook's Rest and Harrenhal. Cracklaw Point is a smaller settlement to the west of Rook's Rest, but they have a really interesting history. Multiple different groups tried to subdue them, including the Andals and the Darklands, but no one succeeded until the Targaryens. Even then, the Lords of Cracklaw just saw what happened to Harrenhal and then swore allegiance. No one's ever actually beat them in a fight, and they're known as half-wild. Now, there is a lot going on with Rhaenyra's council, so here's just a quick breakdown. This guy, the one who keeps questioning Rhaenyra, that is Sir Alfred Broom. He is from House Broom of the Westerlands. This is Sir Laurent Merbrand. Now, he was born to House Ashmark, a ward of the Lannisters, which you would think would make him Team Green. But he was also Kingsguard to Viserys for years, which is why he has chosen Rhaenyra's side. This is Steffan Darkland, also a member of King Viserys' Kingsguard. His house just fell to the Greens, and we saw his reaction here.
Duskendale.
The city has fallen. Many Darkling men declared for Aegon.
This is Maester Gerardus, and he has been chilling at Dragonstone for a while. He taught Jace High Valyrian.
Aegon Undas. Aegon ordered that the tree should be killed.
This is Lord Massey. His house declared for Queen Rhaenyra immediately, and one of his daughters was a lady-in-waiting for Rhaenyra when she still lived at King's Landing. This is Lord Simon Staunton. His house seat was at Rook's Rest, so it's a rough day to be him. And finally, this is Lord Bartimos Celtigar. The Celtigars are another house with Valyrian descent. It's one of the reasons why they side with Queen Rhaenyra. Their seat is Claw Isle, another small island relatively close to Dragonstone and Driftmark. We cut to Jace and Baela. So there's 2 cool costuming details here. One, Baela is wearing a necklace that looks like dragon teeth with drops of blood, just like Rhaenyra in the first scene. 2, Jace has a little pin with a knife on his chest. Now, the hand of the kingpin is a hand holding a knife that is much bigger. So I'm wondering if the tiny knife represents that he's like a mini advisor. Also, I love when Baela says,
"You are the succession."
I just immediately heard the Succession theme, but you know, with Targaryens. We cut to Daemon on Caraxes. Now, obviously, what he's doing to the Brackens is similar to what Daenerys did to the Tarleys.
Bend the knee to me, or your house burns.
Bend the knee and join me, or refuse and die.
But instead of refusing to bend the knee for honor, they won't bend the knee because they really just hate the Blackwoods.
I would sooner be the Lord of Bones and Cinders than bend my knee before some heathen Blackwood.
Person, why do they hate each other so much?
It is a long story that goes all the way back to the Age of Heroes. Basically, they both claimed they were rightful kings and the other usurped them. I know, it sounds familiar for Game of Thrones. But in short, they've now been feuding for thousands of years and have a river of bad blood between them. Now, for once, Daemon did not want to fight directly.
There are things the crown itself must not be seen to do.
He's learned from his mistake with Jaehaerys. He doesn't want another scandal, but his plan is stupid. It was a bad idea to set 2 rival houses against each other. It was always going to go too far. This whole plan shows why Daemon needs Rhaenyra and why Rhaenyra needs him, but we'll get into all of that in just a bit. We switch to the Vale. So in case you didn't watch Game of Thrones, let me fill you in. The Vale is a region of Westeros that is ruled by the Arryns and is surrounded by mountains. In order to get into the Vale, you have to go through the main castle, the Eyrie. Now, the actual mountains are pretty inhospitable, but beyond the Eyrie, there are valleys that are nearly as fertile as the Reach. So the Arryns don't have to depend on anybody. They have their own food and they are impossible to attack.
The Eyrie itself is impregnable.
Also, let me just say, their castle is sick. We saw it in Game of Thrones, and it has all these great and terrifying features like moon doors and open wall cells. Very cool. Also, this is Lady Jane Eyre. So a quick TLDR on her. She is the ruler of the Vale, and multiple male family members of hers have tried to usurp her. They all ended up in those scary sky cells. She sided with Rhaenyra specifically because, in this world of men, we women must bend together. Also, notice her dress. The Eyre crest is a white bird on a blue background, hence the blue dress and bird embroidery. In the book, Lady Jane Eyre rules with a bit of an iron fist, understandable given that her own relatives tried to overthrow her, but this was a mean way to tell Rhaena that her grandmother died.
My sympathies for the death of your grandmother.
We cut back to Dragonstone. Rhaenyra says,
I am now the sovereign. I cannot do as I please.
Now this has been a long-running theme for the Targaryens. As a child, Rhaenyra lamented the lack of control that she had in her own life.
How lucky you are to have a say in your own life.
Alicent felt chained to her duties as the queen.
I like to believe I'm still the Lady Alicent, but all anyone sees when they look at me now is the queen.
And we even saw Viserys struggle with it.
I never asked to remarry.
As king, you have a claim on all things, even those you don't want. Marriage is not an obligation you can put off for long.
Rhaenyra also says,
And war has ever been for men to make.
Which shows that, in many ways, she's more Westerosi than she is Valyrian. In Valyria, women were just as strong warriors as men. Two of the first Targaryen conquerors were women. Visenya specifically was a great warrior, winning several battles for her brother. In Fire and Blood, it says Visenya was as much a warrior as Aegon himself, as comfortable in ringmail as in silk. She carried the Valyrian longsword Dark Sister and was skilled in its use. Women have served in wars, just not in Westeros. However, Rhaenyra was also raised to be a diplomat and not a warrior. But as highlighted by Daemon's failures, diplomacy is important. Like Rhaenys said, every boy in Westeros was trained to fight, so they are excited for war. The Targaryens have several warriors, but they lack strong diplomats. Rhaenyra's feminine upbringing is actually one of her greatest strengths because she can be the diplomat that the Blacks need. Separated from Daemon, Rhaenyra is now listening to Mysaria, just as Daemon is listening to Alice. It's a really cool switch up, and it shows how these two characters are parallels to one another. Mysaria says,
There is more than one way to fight a war.
Now, I've mentioned this before, but Mysaria is very similar to Varys in Game of Thrones. They both cared about the small folk of Westeros, but also knew how to leverage those small folk during times of war.
Do not underestimate your subjects. They are 1,000 living in the shadow of the Red Keep and forgotten.
You wish to know where my true loyalties lie? Not with any king or queen, but with the people. The people who suffer under despots and prosper under just rule.
The Greens have forgotten the small folk completely, as exemplified by the rat catchers and Meleese's head. So if Rhaenyra uses a traditionally feminine tool, gossip and rumors, she has a new tool in her arsenal that the Greens are completely ignoring. Also, notice that she sent her own servant to King's Landing. She's even using the small folk of her own household. We cut to Baela and Rhaenyra mourning Rhaenys. Baela says,
She snuck into the dragon pit, his own mother's dragon. The fastest beast ever known, and she'd have none of him, but bent her neck to Rhaenys.
Now that's really interesting because it mirrors how Aemond claimed Vhagar. If you remember, Rhaena was planning to claim her since she was her mother's dragon, but she never got the chance. That's why Aemond lost an eye. Rhaenyra says,
I do not wish to stand alone.
Which highlights the differences between her and the rulers on Team Green. Both Aegon and Aemond isolated themselves from their support systems. Aegon fired and then exiled his grandfather. Aemond just usurped his own mother. The Greens want power, whereas Rhaenyra wants to protect her lineage. We cut to Daemon in Harrenhal, where he is having another vision, this time that he's having sex with his own mother.
Ew.
Now, metaphorically, it shows that he truly wants to be father of the realm, but still, gross. She says,
My favorite son.
In Season 1, Daemon and Viserys argue over who was the favorite.
I will not revisit this debate. You were always mother's favorite.
But the truth is, neither of them really knew their mother. She died when they were both really young. If Daemon truly was the favorite, then it would also explain why he's dreaming of her. Viserys got his father's attention because he was prepped to rule, but Daemon lacked parental attention because of his mother's passing. We know that Daemon craves attention, and it makes complete sense to me that this stems from his childhood. He leaves blood on her chest. Now that is probably from the wound on his hand that we see later in the episode, but metaphorically it represents the literal blood on his his hands from the actions of the Brackens. Also, they shoot the scene with a fisheye lens, so it gives it a dreamy, warped look, as well as making us uncomfortable because people are looking straight into the camera. So Daemon comes to in Harrenhal's dining room. Sir Simon Strong says,
"The roof alone has needed tending since the reign of Aenys."
So King Aenys was the son of Aegon the Conqueror and Queen Rhaenys. He was a famously weak king. In fact, as soon as he died, his brother, Maegor the Cruel, usurped his son and began a bloody 8-year reign. He also mentions the Wailing Tower. So the Wailing Tower is a massive pillar in Harrenhal. When Aegon the Conqueror attacked, Balerion's fire was so hot that it cracked the stones. Now, wind whistles through the tower, creating a wailing sound. Also, Team Black is broke.
There's, of course, the matter of payment.
But how? They're royalty.
Well, remember how the old Master of Coin was killed in Season 1? Well, the new Master of Coin is Sir Tywin Lannister. In the books, he immediately seized the treasury and divided the money up in different places. So Rhaenyra does not have access to most of her family's funds. When Daemon gets up to leave, you can see a painting of weirwood trees in the corner. Remember, Harren the Black felled a whole acre of these holy trees to build his castle. So memorializing them with the painting is pure hubris. I think it could also be implying the strange control these weirwood trees are exerting over Daemon through Alice Rivers. We cut back to King's Landing and Alicent brought back her religious drip. She has a 7-pointed star on her dress, 7-pointed star earrings, and a 7-pointed star ring. Later, we even see that she has a 7-pointed belt.
Now I'm feeling so fly like a G6.
The Maester says,
"The armor was Valyrian steel, but His Grace suffered grievous burns over much of his body."
This really shows how strong Valyrian steel is. Remember, Dragonfire melted stone back at Harrenhal, but his Valyrian armor kept Aegon alive, even if he is pretty messed up. Alicent suggests herself as the regent ruler.
I myself served in this role for my husband. I am well prepared to do it again.
But of course, this doesn't work out for her.
The obvious choice is his immediate successor, Prince Aemond.
She spent a lot of time weaponizing sexism against Rhaenyra, but she never expected it to come back and bite her in the ass. We saw a bit of it earlier in the season.
An ally would not repeatedly cut my legs from beneath me at that table of men.
But it's fully realized here.
What would it say if in response to Rhaenyra's crowning we raised up a woman of our own?
She had power in the old regime, but it was only because her husband granted her that power. The same husband who thought that his daughter should be queen. The king wasn't sexist, so he allowed Alicent to rule in his stead. Now that these sexist ideals of Westeros are back in place, the very ideals that she has upheld, she now has no power. It's like that meme, "I never thought the leopards would eat my face," sobs woman who voted for the leopard eating people's faces party. And then we get a minute-long shot just slowly pushing in on Alicent as the council chatter dulls around her. Really, it was her who started this war, and now she has been forced out of it. The talk muffling around her represents that she is unimportant on this council now. She doesn't even need to listen because they would never value her opinion. Prince Aemond ends his first meeting by saying,
"Someone cut down the rat catchers."
So Aegon hung the rat catchers, independently. So taking down the bodies shows that Aemond is erasing his reign. We switch to Hugh Hammer and his family. His wife mentions Tumbleton, which is actually a very important city in the books, but it happens later on, so no spoilers. Hugh says,
"The king has promised payment."
Of course, that's not going to happen now since Aegon is in a coma. Hugh perfectly encapsulates the small folk that Massaria mentioned.
They are afraid. Bread is scarce. The king has fallen. They whisper to each other that when Viserys lived, there was peace.
Hugh's portrayal in the show is really interesting. In the book, he's a complete asshole, but he's super sympathetic in the TV show. So I love how they've expanded on this character and let us see into his personal life. Fire and Blood only recounts the remembered history. The beauty of the show is that we get to see these rich character moments that actually shape the motives that made history. And then we see the rat catchers being taken down. And look, the little dog still being followed by its owner. It's the saddest thing I've ever seen since that episode of Futurama. And if you know the episode I'm talking about, fine, but don't show a clip of it. It's too sad. Cole says to Alicent,
"We have given the war to the dragons."
And honestly, that's the reality everyone is facing right now. Aegon the Conqueror took over Westeros because he had dragons. He simply lit his enemies on fire. But it's been 130 years since his conquest and 80 years since war. In common memory, dragons faded from flying nukes to pretty magical creatures. But ever since Maelysa's head got carted through the street, everybody has to face that dragons are inherently creatures of destruction. And then Cole hits her with more subtle sexism.
"Have I not spared you?"
Instead of outright saying that women shouldn't be leaders, he frames it as an act of service. Women don't have to deal with the tragedy of war. Of course, That's not true. Maybe they aren't allowed on the battlefield, but they still have to deal with the fallout. After all, Alicent watched them remove her son's burned flesh. This line of thinking is just another way to keep women out of power. Aemond instructed the Gold Cloaks to seal everyone inside the city, which is exactly what Queen Cersei did in Season 8 of Game of Thrones.
But why would he do that, person?
Well, it's really messed up. Cersei shut people inside King's Landing to use them as human shields. Daenerys couldn't attack without an insane amount of civilian casualties, and I think Aemond is doing the same thing here. Also, I loved this line.
Aemond. Does he mean the king?
Even people in King's Landing don't know if they're mixing up the names. We're all in the same boat. We cut to Jace with the Freys. Now, the Freys played a huge role in Game of Thrones. They famously murdered a ton of Starks at the Red Wedding. The reason they're so important is because of their castle, the Twins. The Twins consist of two small castles that form pillars for this bridge to cross the Green Fork of the Trident. It is the easiest way to move from the north into the Riverlands. The Freys were originally small lords, but after they built this bridge, they gained prominence because they essentially controlled all travel from the north into the south and vice versa. Notice that Jace's shoulders are barely above the table to highlight that he is an inexperienced kid. But I'll be honest, he's not bad at this.
Our fear lies in Vhagar.
You fear a dragon, leagues away, when mine own sits outside your walls.
At Harrenhal, Alis forces Daemon to confront what he's done by forcing him to hear.
And once again, in the name of power, it's the weak and the women who must endure.
Just as Mysaria showed Rhaenyra a way forward, Alis showed Daemon the error of his ways. Together, Alis and Mysaria highlight why Daemon and Rhaenyra need each other. Daemon is objectively a great fighter and a combat strategist.
We don't have enough men to surround the island, but we can make ourselves appear stronger than they are.
And Rhaenyra is a great diplomat. Together, they form a powerhouse of military strength and political knowledge, but only if they, Daemon, can put aside their petty differences and their personal quest for power. We cut back to Lord Corlys. Baela says,
I am sad to have missed its highest days.
Prior to Corlys, Valyrian was only a small house. Their only claim to fame was their Valyrian blood. For most of their lineage, they only had one castle in Driftmark that was pretty unimpressive. But then, Lord Corlys became super wealthy from his voyages and built a much nicer castle on High Tide.
Then why does he say that High Tide is a tomb?
Because he did everything to raise up his family, just for most of them to die. Corlys was relentless in pursuing the crown.
I never wore the crown, because the realm would not have it so.
And I would remedy that small-minded error by any means necessary.
And it led directly to the death of his son and wife. His daughter also died away from home because of her marriage to a Targaryen. In trying to raise his family up, he lost everything. His luxurious castle now only serves as a reminder of his ultimate failure. Baela says,
The wealth you brought back from Yi Ti and a shy, inspiring awe.
Yi Ti is an extremely wealthy nation ruled over by a god emperor. It's also an ancient civilization. Westeros mainly interacts with them through trade because they export a lot of spices and wine. Also, Mysaria is originally from Yi Ti. Asai is another city in Essos. It's at the end of the known world and it is super freaky. Nothing can grow there, there's barely any sunlight, all animals die quickly, and there are no children. It is a huge hub for magic and is filled with sorcerers. Melisandre, the Red Woman from Game of Thrones, is originally from Asai, which explains her magical abilities. Corlys says,
Rather I would sail into the west and be lost.
And Baela responds,
You have done so before, at great cost to yourself and those who loved you.
This is a reference to his departure following the death of Laenor in Season 1. Baela also says,
The queen who never was, and she flew to Rook's Rest of her own will, in defense of her kin.
So for years, that was Corlys' excuse for chasing power, and it's what ultimately draws him back to Team Black. That also explains why he tries to name Baela as his successor.
I would make you my heir.
It was another one of Rhaenys' final wishes.
Would displease neither Rhaenyra nor the gods. Rhaena were named heir to Driftmark.
Also, cool little costuming detail, Baela has earrings that look like dragon teeth. Back at Harrenhal, Daemon is awoken by Lord Strong.
Now, what godless hour is it?
The wolf.
What's the hour of the wolf? Oh, I know. Is it my hour? Hour.
It's actually the hours between 3 and 5 a.m., supposedly when the most people die. Then we learn the full extent of what happened to the Brackens.
The sacred septs on Bracken lands were looted and burned.
As were the fields and farms.
And it happened under Targaryen flags with Rhaenyra's red sigil. Remember, Daemon said this,
There are things the crown itself must not be seen to do.
But that isn't exactly clear instructions. Lord Blackwood probably just thought that Daemon himself couldn't participate, not that Targaryen flags couldn't fly. Like I said earlier, Daemon passed the job to the Blackwoods so Team Black wouldn't have another scandal, but he failed. It's like young Rhaenyra said,
and I have to clean up afterwards.
We cut back to King's Landing. The servant is able to get inside the gates because Myssaria's name still carries weight.
I have an errand for the Lady Massaria.
Similar to how the Gold Cloaks still respected Daemon in the first episode this season.
Commander, never gone for long.
This highlights that the Blacks may seem isolated from King's Landing, but they actually still have a lot of pull. And then we see Diana, a servant highlighted a few episodes ago, as well as the girl that Aegon sexually assaulted. This might explain where Massaria got so much information in the first season. We know that Diana no longer works at the Red Keep, but it's possible that after her sexual assault, she was rightfully angry with the Targaryens and worked as a spy for Massaria. We cut to Aemond staring at the Iron Throne. The music almost sounds like it's whispering to him. Just like Daemon heard whispers in Harrenhal. Again, highlighting the two similarities between these second sons. Aemond is also confronted by Helaena, who knows what he did because of her gift. Daemon spent nearly this entire season being confronted by women from his own past because of the woman in his present, the witch Alice Rivers.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
We cut back to Aegon, who is definitely rocking the Anakin post-Obi-Wan look. And in case you missed it, right as Alicent is leaving, he says, so he is officially out of his coma, which means that Aemond may never get to sit on the Iron Throne. After all, Aegon now can tell everybody what actually happened, so I'm excited to see how this plays out. Back at Dragonstone, Rhaenyra is still staring at the warrior Queen Visenya, but Jace says,
I hope you do not mean to use her as an example.
Which echoes Myssaria's earlier advice.
What you cannot do, let others do for you.
Rhaenyra doesn't need to be a warrior, she needs to be a diplomat. Jace says,
we have no dearth of dragons.
So let me go over all the unclaimed dragons at Dragonstone. We'll start with Vermithor. We saw him at the very end of Season 1. His only rider thus far was the great King Jaehaerys. There's also Silverwing. She was ridden by Alysanne Targaryen, King Jaehaerys' wife. And there's also Seasmoke, who was formerly claimed by Laenor. So those are all of the tamed dragons. There are also 3 wild dragons named Grey Ghost, Sheepstealer, and Cannibal. Grey Ghost is super reclusive. Sheepstealer is mainly known for, you guessed it, eating livestock, and Cannibal is a massive dragon that feasts on its own kind. So he's not too personable either.
Cannibal? Whoa!
Jace mentions that all the Dragon Lord legends came from
Valyrian histories, written to gild us in glory.
So we actually don't know how true they are. It's possible that anyone could ride a dragon, and there's no way to know because only the Targaryens know how to raise and train them. Remember, Rhaenys was half Baratheon, and she was able to claim Meleys. Rhaenyra says,
there are records here, surely, of our line, and of those who fell out of it.
And we have seen a lot of bastards this season. There's Corlys's bastards, Adam and Alan of Hull. Ulf-White also claimed to be a bastard, so there's actually plenty of dragon blood right on their doorstep. So I really like this episode, and it seems like the tide is definitely about to turn for Team Black. Big shout out to the writer of this video, Brianna McLarty. You can find her social links below. And just a reminder, everyone, to take the hassle out of eating healthy, give Factor a try. Head to factor75.com and use my promo code ScreenCrush50 to get 50% off your first box and 20% off your following month. The link is below.